Oh, God, was that?
Hey, everybody.
Wow, look at this squad.
Yes. How are y'all today?
Perfect.
Good.
Wow, look at all these awesome people. You have way more friends than I do.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, Diana, how are you?
Good. Nice to see you.
Too. Thanks for joining.
Yeah. Happy to drink your wine today.
Okay.
Is that him? Right here. You guys are the
That's me.
first picture. Oh, you guys are the picture. Okay.
Dan Gagan? Nice.
I saw Mr. Gagan on here.
Wow.
Hi there.
Hi, everybody.
Hi guys, good to see you.
We will start it at about 5 after, so we can all just chat or do whatever, and then at some point I'll mute you, but we'll give everybody time. There's still people joining, so.
Is Sonia going to join today?
She's here. She might make a cameo.
Hi, Sonia. I recognize that voice anywhere.
Yes, the disembodied voice in the background there.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's that way I can't say anything too crazy. Yeah.
I think you might have done that once before, Greg, though. Even in her presence, so.
Adam, what are you going to drink first with wine?
We're going to start out with the Sweeney Canyon Chardonnay.
Okay.
It's the 2009?
2009, correct.
On your left.
For sure. Jump in, honey. Leah's here. Katie. Oh my gosh, this is like
Alt plus A.
Sonia Magnevsky.
Yeah, I knew. I recognized us.
Hi, Sonia. There's
Hi. Where is she?
There's Greg.
We're starting at
Good thing you're further than 6 feet apart.
it's always hard sometimes in the same room too, because you hear the person saying something in person before it comes through. So.
Yeah.
Someone is getting an important call.
I think it's Dan of all people, Dan Gagan.
Yeah, I he's running to fix it. Sorry.
I know.
So
Yeah.
Come on,
Dan,
yeah, we have a fireplace too. We can make it roar. Roar.
Greg, I would love to hang out of that fireplace again. Soon, I hope.
You really can
You don't
have
want to watch?
two outside.
Yes, that's beautiful. Very inviting there,
Yeah.
Dan.
Copies, bill lights.
Yes,
I do. Tell me how.
I'll do it. Just
I don't know if it's that particular fireplace, but I'm pretty sure Dan has a lodge that you can go stay at. So we should ask about that.
Yes, I've seen pictures, and you can play with those cute puppies too.
sounds pretty wonderful right now.
It's so funny seeing Sonia on the screen.
Yeah.
I can pull her pigtails.
All right, so I am going to mute everybody, and then Greg, I will unmute you, or if I have difficulty doing that, because sometimes I do, then I will ask you to unmute yourself.
Perfect. I'm back.
You are back. Perfect. All right, so everyone, let's get started with just a couple of housekeeping things first, and then we will go from there. So for this session, if you have questions, there is a chat function down at the very bottom of the screen, and you can just type in your questions, snarky comments, whatever you want. Please feel free. Give Greg and I all the grief that we deserve, or ask us difficult questions along the way. We will be more than happy to answer those. I want to give all of you a reminder that next week on Tuesday, I am going to be doing a conversation with Rich Aurelia, owner of Red Stitch Winery and all-time San Francisco Giant, great partners in Red Stitch with Dave Roberts from the manager of the Los Angeles Dodgers. So, and Dave might jump in as well at that. So that will be fun. So that's next Tuesday as well at the same time. So let's get this going. Greg, thank you for being here for an encore appearance. It's great to see you.
Thank you. I love being here. And it's such, I'm so touched and flattered that you're all joining as well. I never take for granted that there's interest in people who are into doing this. So thank you all for giving me this gift of sharing the appellation with you and some stories, and anything Adam and I can do to make it cool and interactive and fun and memorable, please let us know. Also, if I sound weird or if I get dark, I have a light. I can brighten myself up. I can get closer. I can get further away. So just either put it in the chat or say, whatever, and we'll I'll bend to your desires.
So we are starting out with the 2009 Sweeney Canyon Chardonnay. We're going to begin with that. Greg, you were, I think, extraordinarily kind and spent some time perusing through some of the library inventory and looking at things, because part of what we wanted to do today was kind of tell your winemaking story, your winemaking background and history through some wines as well. And to kind of trace them. I mean, not that any wine or even 3 wines will sum up everything, but there's a path here to some extent. So tell people about Sweeney Canyon, the 09 vintage, and what makes this particularly important for you.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, so this, the idea for this one was really born out of our last conversation, Adam, and there was a point where we were reminiscing about the appellation, back in the earlier days, and it was really hard to secure fruit. And when Steve and I started in '96, our goal was always to be in this little corridor, that would later become Santa Rita Hills. But back then, there was Sanford and Benedict, Lafon, Babcock, Sweeney, Huber, but that was basically it. And so, Clopepe was about to be planted. These things were about to happen, but there really wasn't that much. And so in our first year, a lot of our, makes it sound huge, we have 200 cases total, but the 3 of our 4 bottlings came from Santa Maria, which was great that we had access to it. But the one that would come from the area ultimately where we felt the most intrigue was Sweeney Canyon. And so to be able to secure fruit from this area, and it was a vineyard I first became intimate with in '95. I was making the wine at Sunstone. Rick Longoria was a custom crush client. We didn't have a hopper on the press, and so we bucketed and shoveled all the fruit into the press. And so we got Sweeney and Huber because they were really important spots for him at Gainey and for his own label. And so anyway, so it's very sentimental to me. And it is, the first vineyard with which we worked. We worked with Sweeney from '96 through 2011. We took some of the Budwood at Sweeney, we put it at Machado to kind of continue that legacy, because it's an interesting mix. It's kind of Wente Chardonnay, but there's some weird stuff in there too. There's some Sauvignon Blanc probably, there's some Riesling, I think. It's really floral typically, and you get it even with age. It's kind of like almost Riesling-esque in some ways. And so anyway, it's poignant that way. And it made me think about what, you, Diana, what we all went through back then with fruit. I mean, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'll get that vineyard, that vineyard, that vineyard. I mean, you really had to work at relationships in a beautiful way. And I think that's not really the case anymore.
No, I agree with you. You did, we did, you had to, I mean, first off, at the very, very beginning, nobody knew who we were. Nobody knew who you were. I mean, it's like you had to convince somebody that there was a reason they should take the chance to sell you grapes.
Oh, absolutely. I remember, I think I sent you, the letter I got back from Bob Marks, the father who's long since passed away, unfortunately. But, I wrote to him, and I remember I typed a letter and I explained like, oh, we're starting this wine project. We're going to go for this. It's high end. We're going to wax dip everything. We're going to hand number labels, wood boxes, the whole thing. To your point, like pitching that we would be cool because we hadn't done anything, And then he was like, he agreed to sell us a ton. And you know, it was $1,200, and that was how we all got started.
So
And then it was fun too. Go ahead.
yeah, well, no, one of the things also though that you did mention was like some of your early wines, Santa Maria, and obviously Santa Maria can be a great place to grow grapes, and Santa Rita, both very, very special. But in Santa Barbara County, Santa Maria seemed to come to people's attention before. I mean, there wasn't a Santa Rita Hills AVA for a period of time as part of it, but even the vineyards there, and it probably was people like Jim Clendenin and things like that that really brought Santa Maria, I think, to the stage earlier than some of the vineyards in Santa Rita. Does that seem fair?
Oh, for sure, because there were big ones. And if you think about the two valleys, and I share this a lot with people about the appellation, like the genesis behind mapping it, which we started doing in '97, was very academic in nature. It wasn't envious of other Chardonnay and Pinot appellations, you know, in the way that borders can sometimes be fought over, you know, be it countries or school districts or zip codes, whatever. It was really in the media, people referenced Santa Maria Valley being cold and Chardonnay and Pinot, which made sense. There's Baniceto, Cambria, Byron. There's 1,800 acres of cold climate stuff, right? With Sisquoc back in the back corner. In Santa Ynez, you know, most of Santa Ynez was warmer as far as where the vineyards were. If you think about, you know, Gainey, Buttonwood, you know, the vineyards that were back there, and there wasn't that much out west. And so, you know, for us, it was simply kind of seceding from the warm side of the valley. I mean, it wasn't differentiating from Russian River, Sonoma Coast, Santa Lucia, whatever. It was differentiating from Happy Canyon.
Sure.
And that was the message. And that's why it wasn't, you know, and so, but that too was that was all going on at the same time. And so I associate, you know, starting Brewer-Clifton, starting with Sweeney Canyon, starting to map the appellation. I see it all at the same time. So it's a very sentimental kind of starting point with which I wanted to kind of kick things off tonight.
And so Chardonnay has never been my area of expertise as far as making it. Diane and I did make some, but it really wasn't anything that I mean, Pinot was what we did well. This to me is remarkable. I mean, it is 11 years old. And I think it's showing a little bit of golden color. It's showing a little bit of age, but I think it's remarkably lively and fresh and absolutely wonderful. Have you found Chardonnays from this site or from that you've made, or both, or all of them to have aged pretty well?
Yes, our Chardonnays hold up. Their trajectory is longer lived than Pinots, really. I think, you know, Brewer-Clifton Chardonnay is just really, they're pretty wound up when they're young, even though we pick ripe and the wines are pretty intense. They're never handled, if you think about it, at work, right? They come in, they're pressed, they're settled, they go by gravity, old barrels, and that's it, right? They're not stirred, there's no mallow, there's no new oak, and some of, I didn't, my tone was kind of condescending, I didn't mean that at all, but the wines don't go through processes to loosen them up, you know what I mean? They're raised in a very high-strung, kind of neurotic way, in a very raw way, and so I think, you know, the fact that upbringing is very cloistered, it's almost like being raised in a convent. You know, there's that going on, there's alcohol going on, there's acid going on, and good fruit, you know, ultimately. And all those things collectively, I think, help for them to kind of have a longer trajectory. 09, I thought would be kind of an interesting year too. You know, it was a colder vintage. I thought, you know, why not? And it was also a year where I was navigating some kind of challenging personal stuff. And so a lot of the wines are even more kind of pent up, just because I was needing to control things that I could control. And,
Sure.
And so that's an interesting thing too, how even though we do things the same year in and year out, you know, there are sometimes emotional things, you know, be it personal or societal, that sometimes inform in some ways how we approach the craft, you know, by either being kind of Studio 54, come what may, confident, like let's all get naked, and like I'll pick ripe and I'll be hedonistic, or oh, whoa, there's an economic downturn. I can't mess this one up. I'm gonna play it close to the hip, you know what I mean? And so this was kind of the latter scenario in some ways.
And that's one of the things that I brought up briefly that I wanted to talk to you about was the idea. I mean, first off, many congratulations on Winemaker of the Year for Wine Enthusiast. I mean, it's a fantastic honor. Yes, I mean, it's incredible. Having said that, you've also been a person that always talks about devoting yourself to this place, or that it is what you have done. I mean, it's more than just devoting. It's really part of you and in you and the whole thing. Tell me, and then now talking about like some personal things that go on in life. And I was going to ask you, I mean, you know, sometimes before Diane and I were parents, the wines may have had a different feel than a year where you got a birth going on, or all sorts of personal things can also get involved in your wines and winemaking. How do you view letting the wine reflect the place and yet also being involved as a winemaker in the making of the wine? How do you balance that out?
Well, I think our take on that has always been a little bit, I don't want to say different, but a little bit against the grain in that, you know, for us, it's funny, you know, I only work in Santa Rita Hills, really, and it's been 30 years now that I've worked on in Santa Rita Hills. You know, a little bit up in Santa Maria, always Santa Barbara County, but 99% has been down in Lompoc. From Santa Barbara Winery through, you know, all this stuff. And I think, you know, when you really ultimately commit to, you know, a significant other or vocation or something, you know, you have trust in that entity or person, you have confidence in that entity or person, and you can really kind of give in to that person. You know, you don't erase your identity, but you can really let your guard down and be raw, naked, and vulnerable. And so, you know, that's always been our approach. And I think all the wines are raised the same. They're raised with this ethos and energy of kind of dreading any imposition and fearing any kind of intrusion into the process, minimizing my importance, almost eradicating my role in a lot of ways. I mean, everything's done the same kind of no matter what. We rarely chase barrels. We don't really blend the way most people blend. And so in that case, you know, the recognition is massively flattering. And I truly see it as a compliment and shining a light on Santa Rita Hills. I'm so cheesy. I almost like flipped my light on just then. That would have been really, everyone would have like stopped. It would have been like, okay, I'm out. Greg is corny. But really is like, it's, you know, shining a light on Santa Rita because I am Santa Rita Hill. I mean, these wines are Santa Rita Hills, right? It's not me. We work hard, we're careful, but it's ritual and discipline. You know, we're not doing anything. You know how we make wines. I mean, it's like romper. It's the most basic, you know, a kid could do it. And so that's why I see it as being really, you know, more about Santa Rita than anything else. And I love that we as an area are getting this recognition, you know, on a global scale. And I didn't realize it was global at first either. The nomination was the win for me. I mean, I thought that was awesome. And I didn't think it was global. I thought it was, I mean, California would have been cool. Santa Barbara I would have taken. F Street would have been fine. But like and then when I found out it was a world thing, it was awesome. And I think I'm at a good point too in my life where I see the responsibility in this, you know, to use, if people are kind of tuning in to Santa Rita Hills, at least for this year, with a little more of an acute ear, I'm very mindful to take advantage of that on behalf of the whole region in kind of an ambassadorial way. I think I'm at this stage of my life to do that.
Yeah, I think you are. I mean, I think you've invested so much and the area has invested in you. And I mean, it goes both ways. And I think that you are, but you always have. And I think that's one of the things that really, those of us who started wineries in days when Pinot was not the thing and it really wasn't in and all of that, realize how important it is to build one another up and to think of ourselves as underdogs and to grow from there. And anytime something got great press from a vineyard that you got fruit from, that we happen to get fruit from, it helped us and vice versa. And when a region gets pressed, it helps everyone in that area.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, absolutely. And plus we didn't just show up. I mean, you know, as far as all the people that helped us along, you know, all the growers that hooked you guys up, you know, everyone who trained me and who hooked me up with fruit and inspired me and tips and philosophies and, you know, be it the local people here, you know, like Bruce McGuire, obviously, and Bruno and Babcock and all that, Bert Williams, because he spent so much time down here, you know, and kind of, you know, assembling all of these beautiful heroes in my life and just kind of, you know, putting it all together in my own head. And that's really what created Brewer-Clifton. So that's, you know, we all have this as well, you know, and I see it that way because we didn't just come out of nowhere and like, oh, here's Brewer-Clifton. Right. You know what I mean? We're essentially riffing off of the past hundreds and hundreds of years of what everyone else has already done.
So Son wants to tell you, for you to tell a story about a painter.
Which painter? Oh,
It's cute.
Peanut Gallery. Well, there was a friend of Francisco, our vineyard manager, former vineyard manager, who was helping us paint the front part of the house like a month or so ago. And out of the blue, he's like, "Oh, congratulations on the award!" And I was like, "Oh, cool, thanks, Miguel." And he goes, "Was that the world?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can't believe it either." It was pretty funny.
How did you find out? I mean, I don't. It's funny when you went on with the nomination was the win. It was kind of like when I look at the Academy Awards or something, it's the first, they get up there and the first thing they have to say is, well, it was an honor just to be nominated, kind of thing like that. But there wasn't like 6 of what different possibilities there. And you got to see like, they announce the winner and you got to see everybody else's crestfallen faces and all of that.
No, not yet, but I can't wait. No, no, I mean, the nomination was awesome. And like I said, it was like David Ramey. I mean, there's like cool people and then some others I don't know in other countries. I'm sure they're super cool. And yeah, and that was it. And then I got a call. I was driving and I got a call from, I didn't recognize the number, but I happened to pick up because I was driving. And it was the editor of Wine Enthusiast. He's like, "Oh, you're a wine star." And I almost didn't, it didn't even really click. I was like, "Oh, cool, thanks. You're my star," whatever. And then he just, he kind of paid me some beautiful compliments. And what was nice about it too, I think, and something about which I am proud is, it's not, I mean, the wines are fine, the wines are wines, but like, I think it's for them anyway, was like the teaching and the work on the road and the promotion and the commitment to place and all of that was a huge part of it, which is beautiful for me, because ultimately I'm better at that than anything else. And I'm proud of that, presenting, teaching. Sure. That's my life. That's my favorite thing in the world to do. Being on the road, distributors, media, servers, whatever, getting them turned on, like bringing our area to them, transmitting our place to them. That's my favorite thing. And so I think just being able to straddle, just like you and Diana have done so beautifully over all these years, to straddle front and back of the house. I think that's a key part of this award as well.
Was there a big cash prize along with it too, or not?
Yeah, huge. My desk lamp. Yeah, no kidding. That I will turn on before this is over, just to show you guys how cool it is.
Yeah, so let's move to the Pinot, I think is the next one you wanted to go to.
Yeah, Machado.
Machado Pinot, 2014.
Yeah, so so fast forward, I guess. So this is, so it goes from, the Sweeney and, like being super excited to get this ton of fruit at Sweeney back in '96. And then, just like you, and like we talked about last time, you guys, Costa Brown, us, we started with not that much money. We were well received, kind of amplified in the media and around the world, which is beautiful and why we're all still here ultimately. And then we're kind of scrambling to get kind of more fruit, because at that point, it was almost like the Wild West out here. And I think, and so anyway, so we were looking to secure fruit sources, like many people. And in 2005, we took over a vineyard called Mount Carmel. And that was neat. We kind of started a farming company to make that happen. We started planting in '07. And so in '08, so we planted the 3D vineyard in '07, which is a time in Santa Rita where no one was planting any Chardonnay. And we've always been kind of 50-50, Chardonnay and Pinot. And so that was really, and we've always been that way. And people that were planting were like, "Hey, please, can you do some Chardonnay for us? We'll pay you by the acre. We'll pay you the exact same amount as Pinot." And they're like, "No way, why would I plant Chardonnay?" And so it was like, well, okay, awesome, thanks. So I guess we'll have to do it ourselves. And so we planted 3D. And then right after, it was still the glory years. If you think about it, mailing lists were blowing up.
Yep.
Sideways just dropped. The economy hadn't gotten weird yet. It was a very confident time, I think. And again, I hope I wasn't cocky or whatever, but I was young, I guess professionally young enough where I didn't think that would ever end necessarily. I was like, oh, we got this figured out. Like, we're jamming, our mailing list is jamming, sales are jamming. We can just plant like, let's plant a vineyard every year. Why not? You know, and so.
That's not cocky. That's just stupid. I was the same way too. I mean, you and I were like, good times are going to roll forever and ever. And
yeah, and turns out they don't. As it
No,
turns out, anyway.
no.
So Machado, I digress.
Yeah.
My palms are sweating. I'm in flashbacks. No, so we planted Machado. So the reason why I picked this one in 2008, predominantly as a Pinot Noir vineyard. So like I said, there's a little sandy corner of the field where we put that Sweeney Canyon selection. So I wanted to kind of have a tie-in with the Sweeney with which we started.
So how close are the two vineyards? I mean, it's obviously
they're like 3 miles.
Okay.
Yeah. I also wanted to pick this one because it's kitty corner from Clos Pepe, which obviously you're so intimate with, and so I thought that'd be kind of nice to be in that neighborhood. And yes, and then we put 4 clones of Pinot Noir there. We put and the 4 clones are cool, and we knew when we do a vineyard designate, we know what that designate's going to be, where it's going to be from when we put the sticks in the ground. It's like an energy thing of like, oh, this block will be the Machado. Any excess that we don't need for that program will go into Santa Rita. The rest of the vineyard will be Santa Rita, and that's it. And it'll be, it's almost like this weird self-imposed rule that we have. And so there's a little knoll on the property kind of rolling up, and there's 2 clones there. There's clone 37 that we got from Mary Edwards up north, which is our core clone. It's beautiful, and she's cool. And so that's really the core of what Brewer-Clifton's about. And then another one called 459. And we got that wood from Sea Smoke. I think we traded 37 for 459. It's like baseball cards with Victor.
Right.
I'll take your third baseman and I'll get your pitcher or whatever. And so it's always those 2 clones, all whole cluster. And then the other 2 clones, funny story. One is the Mount Eden selection from the original wood, which it went from San Fernando to Lafon to Melville to here. And I always think that's important to have in vineyards because it's like a quilt, you know what I mean? It ties us to where it all started. And so I think that's really important. And then there's a section of Pomard, which is a funny story because we used to have an acre of Pomard at Clos Pepe, and we planted Machado at about a time when I was kind of having a falling out with Clos Pepe.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, cool, let's do it ourselves. And so I put Pomard like right next to her. It's kind of funny.
People don't really realize too. I mean, Santa Rita is a very cool area throughout the whole area, but that area where Clos Pepe is, the lower part, and Machado, it's really cool.
It's super cold. Yeah, it's colder than, it's really cold. And so anyway, that's what this wine is. So it's those 2 clones, all whole cluster. For those of you that don't know me as well, the stuff stays in fermenter for a really long time, and then it gets pressed. Our barrels are really old. They're like 15 to 25 years old, some of which I've had since the very beginning. And that's it. It's racked once and then bottled. It's no big deal.
And did you come to on the whole cluster, what led you that direction? Because there's a great split in Burgundy between like Henri Jaillet, who was not a fan of whole cluster, and then Dujac, who was all the way, all in whole cluster. And it's not like you couldn't have followed somebody and done something completely different than what you did in some ways.
Yeah, we've always done it. And I think, again, it goes back to the people that trained me. So back in those early years, Bruce McGuire, like we would, so I was trained at Santa Barbara Winery. And back then, there was the Lafon Vineyard, which is immediately next door to our 3D vineyard. So really, I am a product of this place. And then Bruce got like, Biennacido, different things. And all of the sexy fruit, Bruce would always like amplify the stem inclusion, right? So that the whole cluster percentage would always go up with like the Q block from Biennacido or the cool part of Lafon, whatever. And then other fruit that would go into other programs, we destem, kind of do it quick and easy, and off we go, and down to barrel, whatever, as opposed to long ferments and stems and everything. And then Chris Whitcraft was down the street, who's since left us, unfortunately. But he was a whole cluster guy. Bert Williams was working with stems, and he's Chris's buddy. And so people around me, not all, but a lot of people in my immediate sphere were using whole cluster, and like the coolest fruit was whole cluster. And so again, being a product of this place, it's like if you're a kid and you grow up listening to country music or something, you know what I mean? Like you either have an aversion to, or you're like, oh my God, that's my music. And so whole cluster was always it for me. And we've always done it. And we didn't, at the beginning it was interesting because we've always employed it. And in the earlier years, I remember one of the first World of Pinot Tech Symposiums, there were some other more experienced colleagues, and I forgot what I brought, Santa Maria Hills or something. And they didn't chastise me, but they kind of gave me a hard time, like in the hallway after, like bullied at the lockers. They're like, oh, you'll learn, it's not about that. Like, I tried that too, you're young and cocky, like, you'll see. And then it was almost like, okay, well, I'm gonna keep trying. And there were some years, 98 was a bad year to do it, and we did it anyway, and we learned, those wines were kind of weird, super weird. So if any of you have 98 Brewer-Clifton Pinot, I'm sorry. I'll replace it with a new one. So, we learned some hard lessons that way, but then along the way, we've always kind of hopefully fine-tuned. And the reason for it, in our eyes anyway, nothing against destemming is cool too, but for us, Santa Rita can be so generous. It can be so beautifully curvy and dense and rich. And you see wine. I mean, a lot of people render the wines out of Santa Rita that way. They're dark, they're sexy, they're sultry, almost black. I mean, they're beautiful. And it's almost like a fatty fish to me, or a very fatty protein. And so I see stems as, a lot of you maybe heard me say this, like a corset on curves, beautiful curves on a body. It's just corseted. And more recently, I've been reflecting on sushi, right? And if you're at a sushi bar, and when the chef like gently passes the brush of soy over the fish, it's the same kind of thing, right? The soy is framing the fish. It's keeping the fish a little more stern in its like direction into your mouth, and there's something kind of kelpy and and savory about it. And that's kind of what stems do. The relationship of soy to that raw fish is kind of like stems to the Pinot in my eyes.
I think it's fascinating too, though, because in some ways, at least chemically, and not to get off too far there, stems, because of potassium, increase the pH, so make the wine less strongly acidic, but they do provide a different kind of corset or a different kind of backbone to the wine than something that is just purely acidic. I think there's tannin, there's other flavors, there's other types of structure that come from them.
Yeah, there's other stuff going on. It's kind of like, again, going back to cooking, it's kind of like cooking something with a bone in, right? It's either a chicken breast fillet, like boneless, skinless, or something on the ribs. And it's kind of the same thing. I mean, it's not better or worse, but the proportion matters, like the preparation matters, the cooking situation's different, and that's kind of how stems are in my eyes. And it offers the wine, I don't know, like a little more something, like a little like extra something that hopefully renders them more intriguing. And so that's how I see them. And it's also taking advantage of everything in our system. It's like having an animal and going like nose to tail. I remember, part of it too was like reinforced by reading Thomas Keller's first cookbook. And there's a story in it, I haven't thought about this for a long, long time, but there's a story in it, I think the first time he was tasked to go out and like slaughter a rabbit. It sounds like a bad story. But anyway, just bear with me. And he did, but like he didn't do it swiftly. The rabbit kind of struggled, and it was a moving experience for him, like in a bad way. And so from that point on, he really revered how valuable that animal, that thing is, right? And so as far as like, don't mess up when you're cooking, just use everything you can, like treat it with all the care that it warrants. And so for us to, emotionally, the stem, like it's there, we're farming for the stems to be ripe. We're working so hard, leafing and doing the stuff we do, and planting and vine row orientation and how we pick and what we do to use them, that I love having them integrated into the system.
So I wanted to ask about that, because you mentioned it earlier, kind of in passing, and now you mentioned it as well. You started doing your own farming at some point in time, or started a company, and we're doing that. Does that play an important factor in you being able to use 100% whole cluster or more stems? I mean, the way being in charge of that farming aspect?
Yeah, that's important, because I think with stem inclusion, it's kind of like, blowfish or raw chicken or something. I mean, you don't really dabble in it so much, your systems have to be in place. It's not hard. I mean, it's obviously the easiest thing in the world. Like, you don't even need electricity. But you kind of need to know what you're working with, I think. And so, because for us too, it's interesting these days, because, we pick quite ripe. And so, for us anyway, the stems are a means of kind of anchoring and reining in this very overt fruit. It kind of just tightens it up. It seems to brighten it. There's a savory play to kind of like downplay some of the overt fruit, right? And so, and there are some others now that are, some other colleagues up and down the street are electing to pick early, where the fruit's more like pomegranate and like bright cherry. And working with stems, which is something that I wouldn't do necessarily, but that the outcome is different. I mean, the stem's voice is more kind of resinous and green and piney, which is pleasant, but that's not really what we're after. We want something like a spicy tea-like something that's harder to pinpoint.
I assume early on, one of the added extra benefits also was you didn't have to buy a destemmer. So from just a pure financial point of view.
Yeah, for sure. Or a clean one. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, we didn't buy one until like 2000 or 01. I think we're still like trauma after our 98 choices. We're like, you know what, we should spend the 15 grand and have that contingency plan.
I had 1 year at Kargasaki Vineyard that had tiny, tiny berries. And I remember we did only like 15 or 20% whole cluster, but it came across as so much more. And in thinking about it and looking at it, the berries made up such a small part of the cluster in that particular year, just based on the morphology of that particular year. It changed the way that I look at stems and berries, and that there's a relationship between the size of them and it's something I hadn't really considered before. I just looked at percentage. We use 1 bin or 2 bins or whatever.
Oh yeah, no, it's critical. I mean, that the proportion is critical. It's just like that chicken breast on the ribs, right? You can't have a scrawny little chicken breast on a huge rib cage. I mean, it wouldn't work right. I mean, so the geometry has to be right. And so that's why, and going back to your point before about farming and planting vineyards, our vineyards are, the berries can't, the berries can't be too small, so those vintages that are tiny, like 03 kind of bit us in the ass. There's some vintages where like the clusters were super, super small and the berries were tiny and the ratio was weird. We went for it anyway and it was less successful, Similarly, we used to work with some vineyards. I think like a lot of people, and maybe it's like a testosterone male thing or something, but like, you see a vineyard, you're like, oh, I want that block on top of the cliff that's like pummeled by the wind and whatever. And because you think, oh, this one's cool, that one's cooler. It's like supersize it, whatever. And those vineyards are not good for what we do. All of our vineyards are kind of in the bosom of something. They're all, if you think about where they all are for the most part, they're all, there's like a hill, there's a reprieve near them, to kind of protect them just enough. And that's really, really important to your point. Exactly. These clusters have to be normal,
right,
for them to be cool.
And I think that can be one of the cases in Santa Rita where with wind and depending on how exposed you are, as you said, it can really be beaten down so much that it's not normal. But we all have in his mind this picture of these vineyards in Germany or something like that. And you look at it, it's steep. And
I've got the lederhosen on and
the steeper the better. But that's not always the case, I don't think. I mean, you want vines to struggle. You don't want an overabundance, but you don't want them to be emaciated or dying out there. And I've seen that happen in places. And I know you have as well.
Yeah, I mean, Santa Rita Hills is pretty hostile. I mean, we get no rain. It's always windy. The soils are empty, right? It's like we have these empty, desolate soils and no rain and wind, right? And so awesome, that's great. And then let's make it harder. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you're taking a camping trip. You have no tent. You've got no shoes, no canteen, and we're going to take your Cliff Bars away. It's like, You've got to have something going for you, you know what I mean? And so I think that, especially because of the wind pressure, that's a big part. It gets overlooked sometimes.
So we're going to end, and we're not done by any means, but on a white. So so going back, so we may have to do a little rinse along the way here, folks. But this is the Santa Rita Hills Chardonnay.
Yeah. So. From 2011, which is also a cold year. I'm not sure why I picked, but so yeah, this one is interesting because this one, first of all, thanks for bearing with me, everyone, with the sequence of this. And some of your settings are so beautiful, like, you know, Dan, the whole like 3 glasses fireplace, Dan Gagan move, it's awesome. But I love shaking up wine sequence from what some people are, myself included, sometimes kind of fall victim to more common sequences for no reason necessarily. And I love the dynamics. Again, going back to like a tasting menu. Again, something else I learned, you know, from reading the first French laundry cookbook. I don't even cook, but like just, you know, all the inspiration.
Everybody's believing you cooked. All the comments here are talking
I know.
cook and
It's all about romance. We've got lava lamp, some cooking, there's incense and candles. Yeah, I'm like Rick James. No,
I was going Barry White, but Rick James.
So I forgot what I was talking about. Oh, sequence. So I love. I think it's so cool, and I think we're all more acute to wines if we ping pong back and forth with colors. You know, it's like going from a pool to a jacuzzi to a pool to a jacuzzi, and I encourage all of you to do this with more frequency. I think it could be really fun. Also, whites are super intense. Our whites are crazy intense, more so than the Pinots, really. So to end with them, or certainly to lead with them, I typically do. I love haiku as a form, and so it's almost like the same going white, red, white. I can't say that many times fast, but doing that is, I always find, you know, I think it's kind of cool. I always end wine dinners this way too. I think it kind of brings us all back to where we started. So that's amazing.
I've noticed a lot of professional tasters do that as well too, that they'd rather do reds before whites, and that's probably because they've got other wines to follow, other wineries, but it keeps their palate refreshed in some ways.
Yeah, it kind of keeps everyone just more on their game, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's that part of it. And then the Santa Rita Hills aspect is something that was born out of the video that you, Matt Revelet, and I did at Industrial, you know, for Siduri, like 6 months ago, a year ago, whenever it was. It was like a long time ago now. I think it wasn't 6 months ago, was it?
No.
Boy, time flies. Yeah,
Yeah.
that whole year that I just kind of glossed over. It was probably 18 months ago.
Yeah.
But you know, when you and I were talking about, you know, how cool it is to, you know, with some of our respective projects, you know, to kind of really, I hate the term over deliver. That sounds cheesy, but you know, to devote, you know, estate grown fruit with the acumen that we have, just because we've been doing it for a fair amount of time, but with more accessibility than what we talked about at the beginning of today, right? When you're like, you know, doing all you can to secure some fruit and these designate wines and mailing lists, et cetera, to have something that is comprehensive, that is, you know, within reach for more people financially. And I think that's really, really important. And it's really exciting to me, kind of going from like the Sweeney Canyon and others model of only designates. So at the beginning, we only did designates from 96 through 06. And then it wasn't until 07 that we started the Santa Rita Hills wines, Chardonnay and Pinot. And that's really, you know, where my heart is. I mean, we still do the designates, of course, and they're cool and they're extreme and singular, and they're cool. I mean, I don't want to like downplay them because our direct sales team would kill me. So I don't want to downplay those wines. But really, you know, what excites me so much is to offer Santa Rita Hills at a price, again, that's more reachable. People can find this wine, and to tell the story of Santa Rita Hills, not simply the deconstructed Santa Rita Hills, which is kind of what the other wines are for us.
I think there's another story also in this particular vintage, the 11 vintage for this wine, and that is how very different Santa Barbara County can be from the North Bay, and how oftentimes with wine writers, the press, all of that, what the vintage is like up north is kind of the overall perception that we're all presented or all have from a vintage. And that happened to me in 89. I was back in retail, wine retail, and I had heard what a horrific vintage 89 was. And yet I remember trying some Au Bon Clement stuff then. And I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. And the rains that affected the North Bay didn't reach down south, and it was very, very different. And 11 was a very wet year up here, up north, but we didn't have the same issues down south.
Yeah, it was, I remember it being long and cold, but you know, it didn't rain at all. It's so funny you mentioned 89, because that year I started in the tasting room at Santa Barbara Winery in '91, and Chardonnay was a big deal for us. And so I basically started in the tasting room about when our 89s were dropping, you know, in the marketplace and in the tasting room. And I remember when that Spectator came out, and Bruce and the marketing, you know, person or two at work were so bummed, and like, just because we got annihilated in the press, you know, California did, and we're like, whoa. And our, you know, we had no issues down here, and that was, I'll never forget that. It was a very formative time for me, obviously, but it was a, you know, a big moment.
I think it's an important lesson to keep in mind as well as we're looking at the 2020 vintage. We're a little ways off from those being released, but the smoke issues that really affected Oregon, a lot of Sonoma County, and even San Lucia Highlands really didn't have the issues down in Santa Barbara County.
Yeah, you know, it's a big state, you know, and it's so funny, like sometimes California gets grouped, like Italy gets grouped or something, like, oh, Italian grapes. And you're like, okay, that's specific. You know, it's a pretty long country. Lando, yeah, thanks for joining. Yeah. Any questions? I think Sonia's handled so many. I've been trying to like keep it, I'm just about to like jump into someone's question and then, you know.
I mean, somebody just
right over here, so take care of all the answers.
Somebody just mentioned, Leah here mentioned diatom. Talk about the difference in, so like here with the Chardonnay, how is diatom different from what we're tasting here with the
yeah, so with diatom, you know, so BC started in '96, and then diatom started on my own in 2005, and it using the BC facility, and it was more, you know, everything at BC is very transparent, it's all neutral, and everything else. But diatom, I wanted to go kind of one step further. I wanted to keep pushing that envelope a little bit. I wanted something very emblematic of place, and so, but also luxurious. And I think that's overlooked sometimes when people are working in a neutral setting, is still having the wines delicious and luxurious. And so, you know, a diatom is a plankton fossil. So the name itself, you know, is kind of very true to Lompoc. We have a mine of diatomaceous earth a couple miles from the winery. And it's white and chalky and kind of like solitary. And, you know, a diatom is a skeleton, right? So that too is very empty. And so I wanted the wine to be that way. And so diatom is very ripe fruit, very intense fruit, very like really epic, beautiful vineyards, raised in a very, very, very stark fashion. So very cold fermented, stainless steel, bottled early. And you know, where it's received a lot of attention in the marketplace has been interesting, more so than I would have imagined. But because there's a world of stainless steel Chardonnay, and with frequency, those wines are cool, but they're snappy, they're clean, they're lighter, you know, you kind of knock them back, you don't think about it.
They're a little more Sauvignon Blanc-like sometimes.
Yeah. And diatom is not. I mean, diatom is like bigger than Brewer-Clifton, typically, bigger, you know, it's kind of more voluminous, but you don't see it that way necessarily because it's raised like a razor, you know? And so, and you know, normally in life, almost with anything, you know, if you have a really luxurious protein, there's a tendency to kind of embellish on that, like a lobster claw is the analogy I use all the time. You know, it's like we have this beautiful, you're in Maine, your lobster person comes in with their sweater and yellow slicker, whatever, and they give you lobster. And, you know, you might take that lobster claw with butter, cream, crazy, you know, over the top, New Year's Eve, blingy, and that's fine. You know, you can also slice it thin at a sushi bar with yuzu and some trance music, and it's still valuable, but the outcome is totally different. And that's kind of diatom is the latter model. So that's kind of what diatom's about.
So someone about your winemaking in comparison to what is kind of become known these days as natural winemaking, and what similarities, differences do you see?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, you know, in response to Sam's query there, I think there have been some movements, and we've talked about these, you and I have at length, in the wine world, and kind of people's desires to, you know, carve their own path and kind of figure out their own thing. And that's fine. In the natural wine arena, some of the challenges that I feel there, just amongst us, on the thing, the 52 people, don't say anything. Is that there's, even by the nomenclature, there's innuendo that anything else is not natural. And I struggle with that. In Pursuit of Balance was comparable, where if you weren't in that group, there's implication or innuendo that other people aren't in the same pursuit of equilibrium and proportion, and that makes me a little bit sad. And so anyone whose intent is pure and whatever they're doing, right? They can ferment wine in a tea mug or whatever. If that's what they believe in and they're into it, that's great. Sometimes, unfortunately, like there's messaging involved where, especially with wine, that is intimidating to a lot of people, can be threatening for a lot of people. There's insecurity, unfortunately, about wine all the time. And if sometimes people seed a little bit of information in someone, and then they swiftly discount stuff as being not natural. So with that huge preface, most of what we do is very minimalist, okay? Like we use gravity, we use stems, it's very like Tarzan Jane stuff. I mean, it's very like, remember Chris Woodcraft, he had like unplugged on his t-shirts because he did the whole thing without any electricity, and that was like his thing. So it's natural in that regard. We use yeast, I love using yeast. I think it's fun, it like foams up, it smells good. Like we've always used the same one. For Chard, the same one for Pinot. And I don't see using yeast like some crazy like violation of something pure, right? And in the eyes of many in the natural wine world, they won't even taste the wine as a result from a buying standpoint because of the employment of an isolated strain of yeast. And that's unfortunate because at that point, then I'm being labeled as unnatural, right? And here I am, 30 years working on a 4-mile stretch of one road with estate vineyards, largely with the same people for my entire career, working with barrels I've used my entire career, doing all I can to like put a ring on this area, to promote this area, to support this area, to sustain this area. And then for someone to not even give me the time of day, you know what I mean? And so that hurts my feelings. It makes me a little bit sad. And I don't think it's necessary, because there's, and also, don't get me started. Everyone's like, whoa, brewer, tone it down. But, also, there are things that can happen in wine that are, more advanced as far as technology, right? I mean, it's like auto tuning in Photoshop. I mean, there are things that happen in the wine world that one could deduce as being like a little out there as far as, making the wines all taste good and be cool. And maybe people would see that as interventionist, but again, our touch is quite light.
Well, and I have been fortunate to not only to get to know you, but with some of the Siduri wines made there at your facility and just spend time with you winemaking wise and all of that. One of the things that's true about both you and me is though we've learned a decent amount about winemaking over the years, there are many, many people that we've been on panels with and we've taught and all that who know more about the chemistry of winemaking than you and I combined.
Everybody does. Everybody knows more than I do.
Probably.
I don't want to lose my gig because it's a really good one, and I've got like people in the company on the line. So, but I know nothing. I mean, I know like I'm on panels and stuff, and it's like I don't even do tech symposiums anymore because they intimidate me. I mean, not only do I not know like what to say, I don't even know what they're talking about. And I'm like, la 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 la.
So yeah, there are probably 50 people on this 52 panel person thing that know more about technical winemaking than you and I do in some ways. So what somebody asked, and I think I already would know the answer. Have you ever thought about, well, the answer was where else would you make wine if you could, or was the question. But I guess my question for you is, did you ever think of making wine in some other location? Was it anything that you ever looked at beyond what you did? And then I guess more, would you ever have like a dream of like, yeah, it would be fun to play here or fun to play there?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So at the very, very, very beginning, I do admit that I had toyed with a couple of other areas. I remember, back in, the early 90s, before we started, of course, I was like, San Francisco was cool, is cool, but I was really into that city. And my mom lived up in, where I knew she spent a lot of time up in Sea Ranch and the Sonoma Coast. And I remember going through the Russian River, and I went to Dellinger, 92 or 3 or something. And I timed it once. I was like, oh, whoa, living in San Francisco and working up in the Russian River. I mean, that crossed my mind back in the early 90s. And then cost of living wise, my sister lived in Oregon. And so I did the same thing. I visited her in Portland once, and I drove to Rex Hill, surprisingly Lynn's place when she was still there. And I did that. I timed that drive, and I was like, oh, I could have a loft in Portland and be a 23-year-old in Portland, and I can get an assistant gig somewhere there. So I kind of thought about that. And then ultimately, I didn't do it, obviously. And I went back to Santa Barbara. And then over the course of time, it's funny, there's been a handful of times when I've been offered fruit from really cool places up north. Jim Hall is an example. There are a couple of people where they had an excess of 5 tons of some, crazy cool Chardonnay site up on the Sonoma Coast or wherever it was. And, those vineyards that are those vineyards that, no one can get access to. And it's funny, I've always, at first, I'd always, it's flattering, and I'd always think, oh, wow, God, that'd be cool. And there was an era where if we had done it, it would have, financially, it would have been a really good move, because we could have just done it and bottled it and it would have been fine. And I've always slept on it, which I'm proud that I've done that. And then I was, the next day I politely declined, when I'm less hot and bothered and a little more composed. And for me anyway, someone up there, I don't know, I'm from down here, and this is the sandbox in which I play. And I think, while it could be seen as confining in some ways, I think it's also liberating in others, because you're there, you're not looking around, you're just kind of, you are where you are. I'm human. Yeah. So of course, there are times where it's like, oh God, that'd be cool. Or someone says, oh, wow, there could be this project in some crazy, snow-capped mountain in New Zealand, and it would be a great Chardonnay spot. And wouldn't it be cool for you to head that up? And it's like, oh my God, that would be cool. And then, but there's probably someone there who's better, who deserves to do that, And so I'm really content with my own kind of provincial thing here.
So then the last couple things, and then as we're getting on an hour, we can let folks go on with their life. But one person here is asking about furthering their interest in winemaking. One person was asking about the pandemic and how it's affecting you. I was just going to ask about where Brewer-Clifton, if there's anything new, exciting, or future, or that kind of thing. So really all 3 of those kind of deal with what is upcoming. I mean, for the wine business, for Brewer-Clifton, for you and Sonia, is there, would you still tell people it's a good thing to get in the wine business right now, kind of thing?
Yeah, it's any pursuit that someone's passionate about is cool, right? So if you're into making cardboard boxes or, furniture, it's if people really, but you have to really want it, because this business it's beautiful. It's hard, I guess, but so is everything. Anything worthwhile is hard, right? Otherwise it wouldn't be worthwhile. And so I would always encourage people to go for it if they want to, and to kind of find their path within it that makes the most sense for them. And, ultimately just to be kind of kind and inclusive in the process, especially, now that I am, older and I've been around, when I do have the opportunity to spend some time with younger colleagues, I do my best to, demonstrate kind of the spirit of being very open-minded, very inclusive, because sometimes when, everyone's trying their best and trying to plant a flag and to differentiate themselves. And I think sometimes that can come at the risk of alienating others, which is unfortunate. So that's kind of where I am, doing a lot more education in the years to come, the decades ahead for sure, ambassadorial kind of things for Santa Rita, for Jackson family. I'm super, super happy. And so pardon?
Well, along that line, what is fascinating, and we didn't talk about it this time, but we talked about it before, you are a French teacher. So, in some ways, the teaching thing comes back around again too.
Oh yeah, I mean that's my that's the best for me. Like I said before earlier, even today, I mean that's my favorite thing. And so I've got this joke with Sonia that like working is my life, and it's that's a whole nother conversation, and it's not necessarily healthy, but that's that's my choice. And but anyway, so I'm never going to retire, but I think it's almost like the wine sequence: white, red, white. I think my ultimate like post-retirement is to get my gig back at Santa Barbara Winery. And I'm gonna be like 90 years old and I'll have like an electric 3-wheel moped or something. Yep. And I wanna buzz down the street, like to give tours there again and to receive people at the bar. And that's like, that would be the ultimate for me, is to do that. And that's a beautiful thing about the company now, is that, had Brewer-Clifton's remained independent, I don't know what it would look like in the year 2045 or whatever, and now that I do have this huge gift of being involved with this beautiful parent company, there's a lot of opportunity for me, when physically, I might not be able to do all the stuff I do now, there's so much other work that can be done to further our collective goals. And that's super exciting. And then for Brewer-Clifton and Diatom and Ex Post Facto, nothing really new. Nothing really ever changes for BC. Mm-hmm. There's a new vineyard that we planted as a company called Paraloon, and that'll start coming online. And that's fun, and that's right in the neighborhood where I've spent a lot of time, and so that's new in some ways, but also very, very familiar in others. And so that'll be fun, to kind of get that going, and that'll probably be it. It's great. That's plenty.
And I do think the other thing that you brought up, and I've seen this even with like Dan Costa. Dan is almost more interested in, can we create a wine, the blend that we ended up with here, like the Santa Rita Hills, more interested in making wine available to more people. At price points that are, well, they're not cheap, but they are more affordably priced. I think that's something we have not, as an industry as a whole, done a great job of in many, many cases. And
not yet, but some have done great. Seduri certainly has. We're there. We're certainly, that's, most of my pursuits are there. Because that's a whole exciting demographic, and $25 retail, and all these beautiful retailers, like the Vaughn's, Albertsons, Pavilions Group is incredible. They're trained their stewards, they have the wine, the pricing is very aggressive. It's a great place to go. And then like the wines, the most epic wines ever, and they're right there as you're going shopping, and Whole Foods enough, but the Vaughn's Group is very kind of, I'm really intimate with, and just, I love that affiliation. But I love the idea of, like you said, 25, 20, 25, $30. It's not nothing, but it's reachable, So I picture a young couple in their 20s or 30s, and, one's an accountant, one's a veterinarian or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, we've heard about wine. Oh, we've heard of that brand. Oh, it's $26. Like, let's try one tonight. I want that conversation. I don't want to be locked in the cellar thing. We have to get the manager and get a key, and it's $90, and that's fine. And I'm still playing there, and you're still playing there, and it's a very important place to play. Don't get me wrong. And I don't mean to sound like derogatory about that. It's cool, and it's sexy and blingy, and that's fine. But I want to hit like with the Appellation stuff. I love sending just the Appellation wines to writers, because those should be good. Those should be enough. It's like playing Name That Tune. Like, that wine should be enough to tell our story in my eyes.
And wine suffers from something that some other things, you go to Amazon and you want to buy a book, you can actually look and read a couple of pages ahead of time. You go to the ice cream store and they offer you, hey, you'd like a taste of this flavor and all that. It's difficult with wine to make that happen for people. And so people are making a real commitment at $25.
Yeah, a huge one.
Yeah.
That's $25 is $25, and so I love, that's what excites me now. And I love that Siduri's been able to accomplish that. I love, with the Santa Barbara County and different things. And I love that, we're now getting closer to doing that. And, and for a large chunk of our business, I think it's healthy. It's healthy to just refresh and to avail yourselves to more people. I think it's critical for survival, to be honest, especially now. And I mean now, not COVID now. I mean like the next couple of decades now, because there's so many choices, and wine is so good that, you know, I'm very prideful to really hit hard and to offer something that's all in. I mean, it's like whole cluster BC estate punched down by us. I mean, it's not like a filler wine. I mean, it's all us.
Well, and I think I can tell. I'm on this Chardonnay. This Chardonnay is stunning. I mean, it is absolutely fantastic. And obviously, it's not filler wine. It's showing incredibly well. So, we've just kind of reached the hour now. I think we should let everybody go. Greg, I want to thank you for this. I want to thank you for being my friend, for you and Sonia welcoming me in your home at times. There you go. For the being part of our holiday season. I mean, 2020, I do not know a single person that would say, boy, this has been the easiest year they've ever had, that type of thing. But I still think a lot of good things have happened to some of us. I mean, obviously some people have not made it through, and we have to mourn those people. But for many of us, it's important that we still try to find some really, really good things and increase time with you and talking to you, even socially, having you on here twice. It's been fantastic. So thank you. And thank you. The two of you have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season.
Thank you. And thank you all very, very sincerely. I mean, if it weren't for all this, we wouldn't all be together right now, right? And that's a beautiful gift. So please, thank you for your time and attention tonight. I never, like I said, I never take that for granted. And please, anything I can ever do for any of you, like, you know us, you're in our home, Sonia's pigtails, need to know where she gets her rubber bands or whatever. It's gregory.brewer@brewer-clifton.com. You know, Adam can give you my phone number, whatever. We're always here for you. Anything we can ever do to be of service, never hesitate to reach out.
So thank you, Greg.
Thank you guys. All right, bye. Thank you so much.